Hi, it's Rita here, and welcome to this week's episode of the Deliberate Leader podcast. This week, we are joined by Dr. Lynette Boy. Lynette is the CEO of Windermere here in Victoria. They are an organisation, non-for-profit, that support families, 26,000 families across Victoria and also broader than Victoria into Australia. And they predominantly provide services around family. So whether it be supporting people with disabilities, supporting, people that have situations of, unfortunately, family violence, people that need support with their kids. Their services are extraordinary. I have had the pleasure and privilege of working with Windermere now for over 12 months. And so given I know Lynette, and getting to know her obviously during that partnership and that relationship, I really wanted to be able to bring her insights and her pearls of wisdom in terms of how she has really developed her deliberate leader practice to you today. I hope you enjoy this podcast with Dr. Lynette Boy. Welcome to this week's episode of the Deliberate Leader podcast, and I am so grateful to be joined by the wonderful Dr. Lynette Boy. Lynette, welcome.
Thank you very much, Rita. Lovely introduction.
No worries. Well, we've had an opportunity for people to hear a little bit more about what you do and the beautiful organisation that you lead, which is Windermere. And today, I'm really looking forward to our chat. I know we've done quite a bit of work together over the last year or so with your team, and really, delving into your culture, the experience that you want to try and create at Windermere, and it's been a joy. And so I couldn't wait to have you on just to share some of those insights with others, because I know they'll get lots out of it too. So did you want to give your take on Windermere? What is it that you do as an organisation, and what's the impact that you have on the community?
Well, in one sentence or less, we're a community service organisation based out in 𝗟𝗏𝗿𝗄, but we actually do work across the whole state, depending on the type of service. So we've got so many different services, which is the great thing about it. There's not one part of the organisation that it's exactly the same as the other. We work with about 26,000 people across the year. At the cornerstone, what we're doing is trying to make a difference in the lives of the people that we work with. So all the people who come to us have some sort of need in relation to an experience they're having at the moment, which might be homelessness or family violence issues, or they have children with disabilities, or they themselves have a disability, or they've been victims of crime. There's a very broad range of services that we work with. So so that's us.
One of the reasons I love working with you, Lynette, and your team is that I feel very fortunate that your purpose and your connection to community is so strong, and that really resonates for me. So I do a lot of work, as you know, in health and in education, academia, and I think if we're lucky enough to find ourselves in a business and an industry where that purpose is so obvious, it makes the reason why we turn up every day so much easier. Like, you don't even have to question. Do you get that sense, and do you see that in your team also?
Absolutely, all the time. And it's very true. I mean, it's so easy to say, but the reality is that we do know, and because of the way our work is structured, we do know that we're making a difference in the lives of people. We've got some evidence-based programs. We've got lots of feedback systems. We're very curious about the impact that we're making with our consumers. So we do ask them. And so we know that we're making a difference. And so that is really important. And, from our finance team down to those who are face-to-face, we are really working hard to make sure everyone in the organisation can actually feel that connection by sharing the stories about how we are making that difference.
Yeah. And that certainly comes through when I've had the experience with your teams, at different levels of leadership too, it comes through. Lynette, just before we hit record, we were talking about the word deliberate, and you said, I don't want to take away the thunder, but one of the things you said was, I think that's something we've got in common, that you talk about deliberate and intentionality a lot, and so do I. And so I thought we might start our conversation with, what makes you a deliberate leader? What are the things that you lean on to help you be really deliberate in your leadership practice?
So there's a few things that weave into that, but one of the things that I take very seriously is about the responsibility. So for me, I've got a job to do, and that is a responsibility. I signed a contract to say that I was going to lead this organisation and that I was going to do all these different things. And I take that contract really seriously. So for me, about being deliberate, it's about, first of all, I wanted to be a CEO many years ago. When I grow up one day, I'll be a CEO. And so I guess I was really deliberate in my steps to get to that point. But with the job that I hold, I see the responsibility and I talk to the responsibility and talk about my actions as aligned with my responsibility. So I try to push that, the things that I'm doing, the why I'm doing it, and the how I'm doing, how that aligns with deliberate steps to fulfill the responsibilities that I've been assigned, and then pushing that further down the organisation, because we all have our contracts and our obligations at all different levels. So in that sense, the being deliberate is how I feel that fits with what I do.
Yeah. So I'm getting there, that sense of responsibility certainly coming through, accountability. I'm also getting that sense of commitment. Like,
Mm.
you're taking this so seriously in terms of that commitment that you've got to the organization, to your people, to the communities that you serve. Uh,
Yeah.
and is that something that's manifested over time for you, Lynette, or do you think you've always approached leadership roles and what you've done through the course of your career in that way?
Oh, I think it's matured over the years, and my ability to articulate it or be very deliberate again in the way I talk about it and intentional about the way I talk about my role, but also expectations. I think that that's matured over the years with just experience, and I guess as I've grown and I've become more comfortable about what I can do and what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. So I think it does mature.
Yeah, that self-awareness, it certainly speaks to that self-awareness, doesn't it? Around,
Yeah.
what we are good at, what we're not, those blind spots
Mm.
that might come in from time to time if we're open to receiving some feedback on them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
indeed.
And when you're looking when you're looking at your team, Lynette, doesn't, not your team so much in situ now, but as you build teams and as you've built teams over the years, what are some of the characteristics that you look for in assembling a team of deliberate leaders to work with you?
Mm. I'm always looking for passion. But what I'm actually looking for the least is ego. So I don't actually like working with people with egos. Now, we've all got healthy egos. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I do not want to work with people who are wanting to show me how good they are because they want to win favor, because I'm not quite sure what they're going to get from me in that sense of favor. What I'm wanting is people who always put the organisation first. So every decision you can see is made around the importance of the organisation and the purpose of the organisation, what it's there for. So for me, that is a really critical element. And I've been so lucky at Windermere to be working for 11 years. I worked with two people who were direct reports to me, who I could every day I knew that their decision making was about the best for the organisation. And we've just brought on another two directors, and I'm just getting the same from them. And there's no ego in the room, and it is just a great way to be able to work.
Mm. When you have had that experience, because no doubt we all have, where sometimes the ego, kind of takes over, and as you say, it is it's part of all of us.
Yeah.
When that's amplified too much, what have you seen is that negative or the downside of that for teams?
I think that tends to, I think it unnerves a team, and then people feel like they've got to pick sides. And so you start to get splinters in a group because they think, well, oh, that person's more powerful, they're expressing a view, they're pushing this. I better side, get in with them, because if they're the winner, then I need to be on that side. So I see that sort of behavior happening, and I think that's just distracting and disruptive, and just not of any great value for the organisation.
And have you had Lynette, have you had a moment, and it doesn't have to be recent, but where you've had to coach someone kind of and coach them away, perhaps, from their ego? So bringing in a bit more self-awareness, illuminating them on some blind spots around the impact. Have you had that kind of scenario? Have you dealt with that before?
I think one of the things that's really important is about honesty as well, and really putting forward what you're seeing, but doing it in a way that isn't going to antagonize somebody. So as you talked about in that coaching model, trying to get that person to see things from other people's perspectives about, when you do this, how do you think so-and-so feels about that? Have you thought about how that might impact on the group? But when you're dealing with somebody who's pretty blind in that sort of way, you have to be very direct and say directly what you think. And sometimes I have been in the position where I say, I just don't want you to do that. It's not acceptable. It's not an acceptable behaviour in the organisation at this level. So, you start off with the coaching and the hoping that you might see some reflection, some thinking about it, and maybe even some pushback in a way that says, I'm seeing it the wrong way. Happy to have that conversation and engagement. But there are times I know that I've had to move to a point where I have to say, that I'm not going to accept this behaviour in this organisation. It is my job to protect the culture of this organisation, and I'm not going to accept that. So I think there's a range of ways and positions that I've found myself in at different times.
Yeah, and I think what you illustrate there is the healthy balance of not subscribing to one mode or style of leadership, right? Because I think in that, if we want to be adaptive and situational, to use the Blanchard's work, but it is about, what do we need at that point in time? And sometimes it's going to look more like coaching, and maybe a less direct, but conversation where we're leading through some really great questions and explore. And then I'm also hearing you say, well, there's also time and a place to go, nah, because we have the responsibility, which you mentioned earlier on, as leaders, to go no. And sometimes that is actually the best way to deliver a message, because it's clear. To Brene Brown famously says, clear is kind. So we don't need to be, we don't need to deliver it with a lack of compassion, but still that clarity. So the message, like, people get it. And we're very much setting the boundary of, this is acceptable, this is not.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think that in everything that we do, that whole concept of respect, and I know this might sound a bit odd, even when I've been in a position where I've had to let somebody go for a direct reason, I always endeavour to be as respectful as possible in that process, and not be rude, and not be saying to that person, okay, this isn't good enough, or using an inappropriate tone, but being always respectful. But sometimes you have to be firm. And you talk about, Blanchard, I sometimes will say to the rest of my team, oh, well, I guess this is what I get paid for. I need to make the decision right now. We need to move into the direct mode right now, and I need to give direction. So I think you're very right. There are different ways of leading at different points in time. But if I'm going to move into that phase, I will often say that, okay, this is what I get paid for, guys. I'm going to make this decision now, and I'm basing it on what you've said, and but I will own the decision. And I think that's exactly right. In every part of our work, there's always that overlay.
Yeah, I love how what you're describing there is almost you're announcing it to the team, not in a sense of, I'm the leader. I'm hearing you say, I'm announcing it because I know that I've got that accountability and ultimate responsibility.
My job.
Yeah. Do you see that creates a sense of safety for your team?
Yeah, because at times they'll say, and I think what my team would say, and I think you probably know from the work at Windermere, I'm a big talker. I love the chat about what we're about to do or why we're about to do it. And in fact, I'm really comfortable with a chat and no decision at the end, or no 3 or 4 steps have to be taken. I am really comfortable with that. And so for me, the value of working with the team that I have is that chat, listening, questioning, getting probably at times too over enthusiastic and jumping in, to the conversation. But if at the end of the day, a decision has to be made and it's an uncomfortable decision, and usually they're the ones that land with me, the uncomfortable decision, I will say, this is my job. Thank you. I'm going to action this. And these are, we'll have listed the risks or the potential outcomes or whatever, the costs of that decision or whatever. But, and then we all move forward knowing that we've had the conversation and, we've got a decision to follow through with. So, yeah, it's an important process.
Yeah, I guess the other side of safety sometimes is that our teams can get far too comfortable, and particularly when they start to rely on either ourselves as the most senior person or a few, there's the seniors in the room. And so I don't see that with you and your leadership team, but I do see it in other organizations that sometimes they defer to what I call the usual suspects to make that decision. So what advice have you got around ensuring that accountability is really there across the entire team? And obviously that ultimate responsibility and accountability sits with the most senior person, but I think it's that downside of providing that safety is that they always then look to one person. What advice have you got around that, Lynette?
I just reverse it and I say back to them, that's your job. You
Yeah.
tell me, what do you think we should be doing?
Yeah.
I had a conversation the other day with and I won't, talk to the position or the person, but they were presenting all this stuff, which was really lovely. And my question back was, so where are you taking us? And they looked at me and I think, they were that, but where are you taking us? That's a really easy question, but it's a hard one to answer if you haven't actually thought that through, or somebody will has presented some really complex situations, and I'll say to them, gosh, that's a lot of information. You've obviously been thinking about it. What do you think we should do? It's within your responsibility. So what are you recommending to me? Because people don't come to me, and not that I'm aware of, without having spent some time thinking about it. Even if they're worried about it, they're thinking about it. So what are the options? So yeah, I as I said, I'm a big chatter. So there's no one ever walks up to me and gets a answer just like that, because I like to know more. I like to hear about how they've been thinking about it. I like to hear their view or the views that they've got from other people. So so I think it's just staying with the conversation and pulling things out and having that people know that they're not going to get, I'm not going to answer all the questions. I can't answer all the questions.
Yeah, yeah. And I think sometimes for leaders, particularly at CEO level, I reckon when you go into that role, it can be a struggle because our value and our worth, we've built careers based on what we know. And then all of a sudden, and I'd love your take on this, obviously, in your role as a CEO, but I reckon all of a sudden we get there and we go, this is actually less about what I know and more about how I motivate and bring this team together and engage them to serve the strategy.
I can talk to that with an example this week. So we've for years wanted a particular role in our organisation, and it's all around, like everybody else, it's all around digital. And we were all sitting in the room, and this person who's got incredible skills and knowledge was talking to that. And I sat there and I thought to myself, I don't have to pretend to know anything about this subject. Not a thing. I can be as vulnerable as I like here because this person actually knows. And I walked out of that room and I thought, oh, thank goodness, because I don't know enough about IT now, and where it's going in the next 5 years, and having somebody on board. It's the same when I deal with finances. My joke at work is always that I know a little about a lot. And I can only ask questions to certain levels because that's as much as I know, but I'm highly curious, so I keep scratching away, and if I don't understand something. So, but it was such a relief to sit there for a moment and go, I actually don't need to know a lot about this subject. I can actually now just continue to be curious, continue to ask, where does that fit? How does that work? Why would we do it like that? I can just keep asking those sorts of questions without having to actually understand this cord goes there and that connects with that. And if we do that, that will happen. It was a really nice experience.
Oh, and it's very empowering for those that that are taking on that the leadership of presenting that to the team, and and then the facilitation of the conversation, getting all the voices in the room. But yeah, you certainly, as you described that, you kind of went shoulders back and down. It's that relief of I've got a team and I've got the capability that I trust, and they can lead this discussion, and we can, it's like when you're, rather than facilitating, you just get to be a participant, and it's an active role. Yeah, it is. It is.
Because and this is my other famous line, I'm not social work trained at all.
Yeah.
So I work in an organisation where, we're seeing 26,000 families, we're providing them with direct services. I've got a fantastic director who is a marvellous social worker and been in that role for a very long time, in that senior leadership role. And I have great comfort in knowing that she knows. But we had playful conversations often about, what's this, what's that. But again, I don't have to know those details. Yeah.
And that's the strength of the capability in the team. And I guess it's, it's how we are attracting, retaining the right talent, and really bringing in people that can take that load off and be demonstrate that subject matter expertise that then sets the organisation up. Lynette, for many of us, we have crossroad periods in our career where we go, oh, that was really hard, that was really challenging. It's not then until we've had some, the benefit of hindsight where we go, oh, that was a lesson that I learned through that. Would have rather learnt it a different way, but yet I learnt it. What's been the most pivotal and important lesson that you have learned through challenge, in leadership and through adversity in leadership?
I think there's some for me that's also been about when I've been led as well. So not only just, I'm sure there's plenty of examples where I didn't get leadership right, and at times not including the right people in the room at the right time, or racing off and making a decision that I shouldn't have because my enthusiasm does at times get the better of me. But I certainly can also talk to the reverse of that, of being led, when I was being led by somebody who was really very rude and brutal in the way they spoke to everybody, and their expectations of the way what they would deliver and how and when and in what time frames. And I learned a lot in that. It was brutal. I can say to you quite openly that I would go home crying in the car every night thinking, I don't know if I can go back there tomorrow. I don't actually know why I kept doing it, but I did keep going back. And I was much younger then, but I did that. And that actually taught me a lot about when I got the job. I didn't have it, but when I moved into that leadership role and that CEO journey, I would never be like that.
Yeah.
I would never, ever treat anybody like that. So that was a really pivotal point for me in my leadership journey, although I wasn't the leader in a leadership role at that point. And sometimes I think back and I think that was an opportunity that was actually given to me to actually really learn what I shouldn't be like and what I didn't want to do to other people. So yeah, but there've been plenty of mistakes along the way where I've done things that I just think, oh, I shouldn't have announced that like that, or I should have used better language. And often it's about language, like I just said it the wrong way, and I should have thought about it before I spoke. So there's lots of those examples that I won't draw on.
Yeah. No, I love though what you said there, because we certainly do get a steer, and one which steers us in the direction of what we are comfortable to do and what we would like to do as leaders. And then certainly examples where we go, I'm never doing that to somebody, because what you're describing there is that the visceral feeling of being subjected to really poor and like almost harmful leadership, from what you're suggesting there. I reckon they're as hard as what those examples and experiences are, they can be really, really crystallizing in terms of, I am going to do that, and I'm never ever going to do that to somebody.
And it stays with you. Like, I'm not wounded by it, but it stays with you in that sense that it's a reminder of, don't do that to other people. Don't be like that. Don't let other people be like that. So when you see it in your organization as well, just don't walk by it. Make sure that there is commentary, make sure there is some discussion about acceptable and non-acceptable behaviour in an organisation. And we're really strong on that at Windermere. Do not walk past something that you think is not right, because the saying, you just condone that behaviour if you walk past it. But so we work really hard at that. And I think that for me, other than being honourable practice, it does stem from that experience in that period of time.
Yeah. Lynette, you mentioned earlier, so I mean, one of the things you talked about is quick decisions, which often we do need to make. I think, leaders, we are constantly navigating the tension between a decision that needs to be made versus one that we need to take our time with. Who are the stakeholders, who's impacted by that decision. But one thing, I want to connect that into something you said earlier, because I've experienced this with you and your team, which is actually a beautiful release valve. And that is that we might do a half-day workshop, and, it doesn't have to have outcomes at the end of it. And I think the first time we ever did anything together, I was like, what do you mean it doesn't need to have outcomes at the end of it, right? And you were like, Rita, it's all good. You showed me that for you and your team, the value was in the discussion and in synthesizing the views, rather than having to land on 3 or 4 actions that needed to come out of that. And that, for me, is this space that you were able to create, and also value in just that. So in terms of, I guess, creating this space, and also navigating, sometimes we make very quick decisions where we don't have the time and space to think. How deliberate are you in creating, I know I see you do it with your team, but even in your thinking and your strategizing, how deliberate are you in creating really that thinking space for you to just ponder?
Well, I'll often say to people, I think I'm going to do a bit of live streaming here, and I just sort of sit there and I will just, blah. And I find myself often, especially with those people who I'm incredibly comfortable with, because I know they know, I'll say, I'm just chatting. I'm not making it. I'm not the CEO here. I'm having a conversation, and I will just, and as I'm saying it, sometimes I'll say, gosh, that doesn't make any sense, does it? But we all joke about it and laugh. And my view is that we are so well trained to have to make a decision and then to assign who's responsible, or why that can't happen, or who's blocking that, or so in and I remember our first workshop where we're talking about busy diaries, and I was saying to our staff, you have a busy diary because you allow yourself to have a busy diary. You let people put things in your diary, and you just willy-nilly respond to all of it. I understand that you are hard working and you are a good worker. That's not but I can't fix this for you. The only person who can fix it is you. So we did a workshop about saying, you're responsible for it. You need to actually think more deeply about what it is that is in your diary. Now, I could say to them, set up a scale, measure it by this. Do I need to be there? Don't I need to be there? What did it, we could do all that. But then what am I going to do? Go and check to make sure that they've all got their scales and that they've checked them off and they've done. I can't do that. I don't have time. So I wanted them just to stop and think about it and collectively think about it. And I kept pushing it back, saying, yeah, but you do that. You're responsible for that. And I know that they were sitting there going, yeah, I know, but you don't have to say it out loud. Go away. But it was fun. No one was crying at the end of it. We were having a fun conversation. And, and now they all still say, yeah, I know, I'm responsible for it, And a couple of them have said, I really have moved the way I'm doing it. And I figure if I can get out of 12 or whatever it is, if I can get 5, 6 to move, I'm happy. Then we'll keep working with the other 6. But it is about, for me, that space to stop and think. And I've been reading something just recently about strategic planning, strategic thinking, about dialogue, about conversation, etc. And I just think we don't allow enough space for the dialogue and the conversation to allow thought bubbles to percolate, to come out, whatever way they come out. You don't have to be smart every time you open your mouth. Let it come out, and to have a laugh about it if it's really stupid, or to, just bounce it around. That's what senior leaders need to do, and to find the time for. I'm not saying 24/7, every day, but you need that time to actually create better thinking.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, because I reckon I love how you call it live streaming. When we do that, it actually creates more psychological safety in our teams, because we're allowing an iterative process of thought. As you said, you don't always have to be on and the smart, it doesn't have to be the smartest, most refined thing to come out, because often when we're collaborating, if we're truly collaborating, it's my idea joined up with your idea, joined up with that person, and the brilliance actually comes from that. But if we don't allow time for this iterative thinking and dialogue, then we're all working in our little silos going, well, I've got to come up with the most brilliant thing and then put that forward. It's
too hard every day to be brilliant, that's for sure.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. I love that, Lynette. I think that is one that I will definitely take away in terms of that live streaming. I think it's that thinking out loud. And when we do that, particularly when you're in the most senior role, we make it okay for everybody else to do that.
Yeah, and to, have a giggle about something that you're thinking. And one of my really bad habits is when somebody says something that's like, to me, seems outrageous, I'll go, no, like this. And then I have to say, that's a no, not a no. That's like, really? And so again, the comfort of the team, sometimes I'll say, oh, you're going to say no to this, but just listen a little longer. And then as soon as they say it, I go, no. And then we just keep going, because, it's just sort of a silly, it's a habit that I wish I could change, but it just sort of comes out. But it's about, that dialogue is just so important and so undervalued. So if you actually fill your diary up so you feel so important, I'm not saying that's what my staff are doing, our staff are doing. They're not doing it just so to feel. But if you've got, where do you get the time to do that? 1 hour a week can even, with just, can really add value. But if you're so busy, you'll never get to it.
Yeah, that's right. And that's where those new ideas, that the creativity, the curiosity, that's where it comes from. It doesn't come from the busyness. Like, that's why so many of us will have the thought when we're out on a walk or doing like something on a Saturday morning. It'll just continue to percolate in the recesses of our mind, and then an idea will form, because we're giving ourselves that time and space.
Yeah. And we've got to do, I know we all struggle with that, but I think for me, when we bring the team together, even if we're doing it 4 times a year and we're bringing the team together and we're having that conversation, that's great. Even that's great, just to do that. And
Lynette, thank you so much for your wisdom today. I so enjoy working with you and the team, and I wanted to ensure that we could share that with a broader group. So I know that people will take away loads from this, as I have. But thank you so much for being on the Deliberate Leader podcast today.
Thank you. I feel very honoured to have been asked.
Thanks, Lynette.